Welcome to a brand new podcast. Ian McLean is a writer and the author of TJ's War. David Blair is an actor and the narrator of the audiobook TJ's War. David and Ian have been listening to their readers and listeners and have decided to turn TJ's War into a movie. And since the story covers the entirety of World War II, the movie will cost at least $50 million. Will David and Ian succeed in their quest? Follow them in this podcast series. We're going to make a $50 million movie.
Our guest today is, well, just about everything we're looking for in a guest at this stage in the proceedings. You'll find out why I say that in a moment. If you're joining us for the first time, we're going to make a $50 million movie. Actually, we might have even increased the budget more than that now. And rather than a movie, we're even talking about a 10-episode TV series as a possibility. You see, Ian McLean has written a masterpiece of literature called TJ's War. Yes. And I'm not even on the payroll yet officially. So the book is called TJ's War. It's the story of his father's life that he didn't discover until years after his father's passing, and but put together over decades of research. It's a war story, an anti-war story, a love story, a possible contributing inspiration for Ian Fleming's James Bond character. Yes, really. And we're going to document the whole process of going from novel to screenplay to screen. And if that sounds ambitious, well, it is. But you got to dream big to get big things done, baby. And I'm joined by two folks who think big and do big things. Earl Bridges is the TV host of PBS's show, The Good Road. He is all over the place, folks. Thailand, Cuba. I think he just got back from Cuba. Isn't that right?
Just got back from Cuba, last week.
Right. Myanmar, Uganda, Zanzibar, Kenya, everywhere, including across the United States. But he is much more than a gonzo traveler journalist. He's a TEDx speaker. He's an entrepreneur himself. Started some tech companies, I believe, right, Earl?
That's correct. Yep.
So you can see where you fit in. Where we need to know, we're at the beginning stages, although we've gotten the ball rolling, and we need some insight as to, well, where can we find $50 million? and and what are the stages of putting together a film production of this magnitude? Where would you go with all this? Ian, do you want to add anything to that setup?
I think it's very hard for Earl, who you've probably never heard of us before this point, but we've been doing this podcast now for the last. This will go out as episode 18, and since it started, we've grown the team. We started with 3, and now we've got 6. We've interviewed some really interesting people. You're the most famous person we've had so far, and possibly, if your fame keeps climbing, you'll be the most famous person we ever have. Who knows?
Right.
We are making good progress, and we've got some, as well as the 6 that we have as a core team membership. We have some other people in the background who are not just watching our progress, but moving things along in the background. And so we are probably going to make a TV series rather than a movie, because the story's just so big it covers the entire Second World War.
Right.
Mark's got all kinds of background, and I've got all kinds of background. So we're not doing this with our eyes blinkered or shut. We know there are tiger traps out there and all kinds of things. And what we want is some of your experience and some of your advice about some things that we just taking the cover off the tiger traps, so that we have an idea of where they're going to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first impressions, like you say, I know very little about the project right now. I do know what $50 million looks like. And but I've been closer to the Loch Ness Monster and Sasquatch than 50 million bucks on a project that's brand new. So, if you look at the television world, even a series, that's still a decent number. And so it's not a small project, nor is it a small effort to get the funding for that. So, yeah, I mean, there's many ways to skin this cat, and I'm happy to give you some ideas of how I would do it if I were you.
Okay, that is where we're going. I mean, the book is written. we've written or they've written a pitch deck. We're working on a treatment.
Yep.
I mean, at that stage, do we approach a literary agent to try to make a contract with a screenwriter? What?
Yep.
Okay,
And well, can I be just candid?
please.
Um, $50 million, you're generally gonna find that as funding from large. You want to get it in big chunks. You don't want to. It's unlikely that you'll get 50 million in one fell swoop, but you don't want to crowdsource 50 million $1 donations either, right? So as you move into the echelon where you're asking people for real money, then what you the danger that you run into, and we've done several theatrical release projects as well. So we've done a television show called The Insanity of God, where we executive produced, helped find the funding and distribution. That actually did a couple $1 million as a doc in 800 theaters in America. We did another one called Free Burma Rangers, which was built off of a episode that we had done in Myanmar, but based on a person that we knew, and it was faith-based. And it did a couple $1 million, and it was a big return. But again, their budgets were much smaller. So when you build a synopsis, a log line, a treatment, you're really thinking about all that. My first suggestion is that you leave enough in there so that whomever it is that you're asking to step in and either provide their own, kind of executive producing, meaning money or fundraising, leave them a little bit of space where they can help bake that cake with you.
Yep.
So if it's, and again, that's where a lot of times people have a really rigid notion of how this thing ought to be articulated. A book is one thing, but then seeing that come to life on a visual, media formats, whether that's television or, cinematic releases or something like that, they're going to want to feel part of that. So you've seen that before. The more that they feel like that is their show as well, then the more they're likely to put up real money inside of that. That's double-edged sword, because again, sometimes the people with the most money are the least helpful in any of this. And we talked about my startups in technology as well. I had, money from dozens of folks. There were very few that were very helpful. The ones that sometimes had the most money were the least helpful, and yet you had to listen to them or pretend to listen to them as you try to motivate that. So there's always that. Staying true to your vision of that is super important, because that's what's going to get you through the really hard times. Because just getting the funding is only, well, let's face it, that's 95% of the formula. The rest of it is really going to be in the creative, hands that you have. And once you have a project like that behind you, then you can do a great number of things, going forward as well. So there's foundations, there's some funding. None of it, governmental arts grants and things like that, are not enough to get you to 50 million. Here in the United States, we do a lot of films around justice and culture and things like that. And there's Ford Foundation has something called Just Films. If you're lucky to win one of their awards, you're at $250,000. You're nowhere near even $1 million. So again, it's a big nut to get.
In one of our business meetings, I had suggested that like we were talking, people were throwing out ideas, brainstorming, crowdfunding, and I said, you know what, we need a whale. We need like one big whale that's gonna back this.
Right.
What about at this stage approaching, like, we also want to get a reputable, a notable screenwriter to turn the novel into a screenplay. When we're approaching this as people who are outside of the industry, how do we, I mean, is the only way to approach someone with a name, so to speak, with a check, like, okay, we're going to pay you 75 grand to turn this into a screenplay? Or is there another avenue to approach people who already have some, how do we get our toe in the door?
Well, when you start thinking about, the way to look at this is you've got kind of the above the line people that are really helpful in the creative process of that, right? So that's your director, that's your screenwriter. Those are the people that contribute their creative juices inside of that. Below the line are the people that execute on that. Anyone below the line wants a paycheck. And quite frankly, it doesn't matter if it's a Marvel film or a PBS documentary about traveling around the world, they want to get paid. And so they may like the project enough to do it slightly less than their usual day rates, but they're going to get paid a market rate, whatever makes sense for them. Above the line is where you have a little bit of flexibility. And that's where you can say, okay, yes, we can slot you into points on the back end, or what the equivalent of ownership inside of this is. They have to believe in the project. But again, the more you're asking of them, the more they want to have creative control. And that's where that heavy balance is on that. I'll give you anecdotally what we did with public television. So in US TV broadcast world, there's basically two avenues that you can go on. You can do, for profit, so a large national broadcaster, or a studio, or a co-production with a studio who may have a distribution on that side. And that's multi-tiered. They'll say, okay, we like it. We'll give you development funds to help you push your project along a little bit, but we want a gut check along the way. But as soon as you go down that avenue, as soon as you bring in someone who's actually going to bring the funding, then you lose not only creative control, but also ownership of the project very quickly. So then that's hardest to hold on to. On public television, the reason why we went down that road was that we own the property. We own the IP. It's our show. So I don't care if there's a better looking host for the good road. It's our show. Unless I make that decision to pull myself off and replace it by somebody else, we have full creative control. The hard part there is that you need to have really big sponsors. In our case, we have Bank of America and Toyota, but I'll tell you, our budgets are nowhere near 50 million on that side in order to get the project done. But you have full creative control. That means where it's distributed, how you monetize it later on, how you pay people, and what you do with that, and iterations of it later on. So there's kind of these two big models that you can do. It's that old adage, how do you make a small fortune in television? As you start with a large fortune. And when we talk about my technology side, I had a really successful exit with a company that was called Good Done Great. And I took that stack of cash and I personally invested in our own project. And that's how we started down that road. I took a big chunk of change and got us way down the road. So it's a conundrum that's, there. It's not that it can't be done. It means that the more that you can de-risk it for them, that you can show that there is an appetite for that story, or that, the media project that you're doing. The more that you can show people that there's interest in this story coming to light, then the better off you are. And that's where it's not a bad idea to do crowdfunding. Because if you could say we had 30,000 people that kicked in $1, 30,000 gets you nowhere in that space, except for the fact that you can show some momentum. And that's really what you want to do at this stage, is to say it's a successful book. It's had, people love it. Some important voices will help throw behind it. And we want to convert this into whatever the visual format is that you're looking for.
In terms of carving up the pie, how many pieces do we give away here? Or does Iain give away here? I mean, does he give enough away where he still maintains 51% control, or is he going to have to slice it up so much that there is no majority stakeholder? There's no single majority stakeholder.
I guess, Iain, I'd be interested in why you're doing the project. Are you doing the project because you'd like to make a ton of money over on the visual side of it? Or does this really help subsidize or create interest over on the book side of it? Or do you just want, do you want the recognition for, your role in the world, and, that's it? I mean, I think those are all significant questions.
Would you believe none of the above?
I would believe none of the above. I'm not smart enough to think of all the possibilities.
The story is the story is about Thomas John McLean, hence it's called TJ.
Yep.
But really, it's a story of every man and woman who was involved in the Second World War, but also in wars since. It's a story that keeps repeating itself over and over again. And so I want the story out there. And personally, it's really my attempt at world peace. I say that over and over again, and it's only just a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I really think that if people, Donald Trump was nearly killed on Saturday.
Yes.
I bet you he's got a slightly different view of sending people into danger, and based on what nearly happened to him on Saturday. And I hope he does. I hope I hope people in positions of leadership think much harder than they have done so far about taking the best of our young and throwing them at bullets.
Yeah.
Then there's all the civilians and everything else. So really, that's what I want from this. And it's not about money. It will require a lot of money to make this because of the scope of the story. It goes through the entire Second World War.
Right.
Some of the scenes, well, maybe the directors and producers can do it through CGI. That's not really my call. If it's not 50 million, it doesn't really matter to me as long as the damn thing gets made well.
Right.
So,
well, if you're flexible on that side, then I think that's a good place to be in. And if you think about what the goal of it is, if it's not money, if it's not so much the money, then what you're really calling people to is the same vision or the same belief that you have. And I think there's a great many people. I mean, there's a dearth of, peacemongers in the world. And there's certainly those of us who feel like your voice is, increasingly lost in the noise of the you've got just pompous and, bombastic, and you just got all this stuff that's going on in the world. And I think there's plenty of people, but you give them room to come along beside you inside of that. And a crowd funding, again, you don't want to do a crowdfunding thing and only get 50 people. And now it looks like it was already a failure before you got there. So there's a bit of shock and awe that you want to be able to, increase, right? To use a war metaphor. Yes. And
I got the irony of that.
You don't want to land on the French shores without, a significant presence. And you need that. But it's it is the foot soldiers and the people that believe in the cause and that will quite literally take a bullet for this project because they believe in it. And on the other side, you need real funding. And real funding there's foundations and there's people that believe in the same types of things. And getting to those people is going to be super important because they're going to be able to say, yes, in fact, this will make the change that you're hoping for. And that's that's your hypothesis that you're working on at this point. But there's a great many people that I feel like need it. And so, again, I applaud you on the effort. I think people get called to great causes and you don't want to dumb it down. You want to be able to say, this could be the thing that turns the tide. And if you believe in it, then lean into it. And then that inspires people. But there's nothing worse than a kind of a half-hearted, would you mind giving me $100? If not, what about $50? Or we'll just take $5 or whatever. You want people that says, I could give you 500, but what if I could give you more? How far can we get it? And that's the mind shift that you really need across the board on the people that fund it.
Yeah.
On the rest of it, the creatives and things like that, they love a good story. This sounds like it could be a great story, and they'll put in their, creative reputations behind it if they have enough latitude to be creative inside of that. So I think
that's good. That's good. And it's not just me. As I say, the team has grown, and Mark's part of this. He believes in what we're doing. Sia believes in what we're doing. Sincera believes in what we're doing. Not just the core team. There are a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
Applauding us as we move along. So, which keeps me going.
Yeah.
Is it okay if part of my motivation is the money though?
No.
Well, I think. Well, you're going to find people that are like that, that are multifarious and complex. And I'll give you that, Mark, that you're that person that's, you've got the duality of that. But look, start where you can. You've got a book, you've got a story, you've got an initiative. You can start with, for example, getting people to just sign up for a newsletter and get those people prepared that we're about to hit our very first launch, which is we're going to do a crowdfunding. We want all of you to tell all of your friends to do something, and you want to show fast progress, on that. And then concurrently, you want to be able to tell people that are big funders that, hey, there's something, as we say in the South, fixing to happen, and just watch it, and then come to the table with something that you've been developing perhaps for a while, but come big. And then gather that momentum. and it's catching a wave, right? You don't want the wave to get too far ahead of you, but you don't want to try to catch it too early either, because you don't have the momentum and it just peters out, or it just swallows you. So there's
I like that.
there's a sweet spot inside of there, but there's plenty that you can do as you're placidly swimming across the pond like the swan and furiously paddling underneath to make forward momentum. And I think some of that is continue to do. I mean, you've got stuff. It's not like you don't have anything. So you've got something to build on, build as much momentum as you can. But when you go public super big.
That's good.
It is good.
What
It's good.
I this next question I feel like is impossible to answer, but what kind of timeline do you envision a project like this taking?
I would say that it's highly unlikely to get it inside of 18 months.
Oh, yeah.
For the funding.
We're realistic about that.
And the reason is first of all, they have to have known about it in order for them to budget inside of it. So big money, even private family offices or individuals have some idea of where their money is going to go. And you're coming in and saying, hey, here's another idea. And it will go through a cycle. So there's people that are watching out. They'll have to consider it. If you were to miss the very first cycle, so you've done it, they've known about the project for 6 months, and then they say, okay, we think we can do it, but it's not until the next year's funding because all the money is spoken for.
Sure.
That's the thing that we heard most. People love our show. They love the stories that we're telling. And invariably, people will say, we support you. However, all of we're completely spoken for this money. So 18 months in the short end to start seeing some money. The other thing is that you don't need whatever it is, 50 million or whatever that is, in hand. You just need to get it, far enough along. So again, It goes back to the momentum side of things, but you got to figure out what's that threshold. If it's of 50 million, if you need 10% in the first 18 months, then you need to be able to do those gate posts that say, yes, this was our goal. We got 5 of the 50 in 18 months. Now we're on a roll. And the bigger names, the bigger brands, the bigger foundations, bigger private offices, the bigger people that can go behind it. Everyone likes to jump in on whatever the next thing is that, Robert Redford or, whomever it is interested in. You want to be on that. You want to be on that train.
Very cool.
Well,
Robert Redford directed a film called The River Runs Through It.
He did, right? Yeah.
Perfect,
Yeah, well, it's the same McLean's.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, there's look, the movie world is littered with dead bodies and a few great successes. And again, you got to believe that when you hit the beach that you'll be the one that survives and have a story to tell, when you come back. But you can't tentatively go down this path. You've really got to go, you've got to go big and show quick momentum.
Oh, I think this conversation was a real eye opener for or for me it was at least. Iain, you're saying that your family has a connection to the family that's about. I know that the river, and so it's a true story. You're saying that's the McLean family related to
same McLeans. They came from Tyree. Well, actually, the McLeans of The River Runs Through It came from Cole. They are the same McLeans. Cole and Tyree are beside each other, and the McLeans that went to Cole were also the McLeans that went to Tyree, because there aren't that many.
There you go.
Yeah.
So they went off, and then one of the McLeans of that family then wrote the book, became a famous writer, and then Robert Redford directed the film with Brad Pitt in it.
Wow. Well,
So I've actually before now sent a video off to try and reach Brad Pitt, saying, "Look, you've already covered one of our family. Here's another one." But I don't think I ever got to him.
I was going to say you mean Brad Pitt's not returning your calls yet, Iain?
Not yet.
Well,
let me throw you out one more thing as I'm thinking about this as well. There's a reason why I'm on this call, and there's a reason why I stay on this call. I think that I can be helpful now, and everyone who you talk to needs to feel like there's a place that they can be helpful. And there's some people that will not be helpful, but again, the people that will reach into their pocket and pull out some cash are the ones that think, yes, this is interesting, and yes, I am the hero in this story. There's a story that's happening, but it couldn't happen without me. And I may be this Luke Skywalker that doesn't yet believe in myself, but I want to be part of, that's going on. And so again, as you're crafting the messaging and as you're soliciting support, remember that those are the people that need to feel like they're the hero in whatever it is that you're creating. You may be great and amazing and whatever, but it's those people that need to see themselves in that story and say, you know what? They're talking to me. They're talking to me. And if I don't stand up and help, then this thing can't happen, and it needs to happen. And I think that's the other, just a mindset with any person that you have a conversation with.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a good shout.
Just an old story tool.
That is why you're here, Earl. We needed you to be a hero, and you've come through. So tell people about, with the time we've got left, tell people about the Good Road so that people can find out what you're doing, the projects you're working on, and where you've been lately and where you're going next.
Well, yeah. So you asked me a little bit about what's going on with the Good Road. So Good Road, we're moving into season 5, which is, again, a lifetime in the PBS world. Not many shows have made it 5 seasons. We're hoping to have another 5 seasons after that, but the show continues to do interesting work, and we're continuing to go to the places that very few people go. We were trying to go to Haiti. That was the only place that we really made a strong attempt at, and weren't able to do it. But we did go to Havana, Cuba. We're in Mosul, Iraq. We've been in some other really interesting places. So try to tell the stories that are really, quite frankly, off the beaten path. And it's hard to get to, so therefore it's hard to tell the stories. That's why projects like this, I think, are interesting. It's because it's hard, it doesn't get told. So if you can do that, then again, I love being inspired by people that are trying to tell hard stories like that. And then, if you look on our YouTube channel, you'll see that I had just gotten through a 48-state tour of all the lower states of the United States as a solo motorcycle rider on my Triumph T120. So there's my British retro bike, my Bonneville. And the reason I did it, quite frankly, is when you're in the creative world, it can get lonely, it can get hard, and I struggled for a long time with my own mental health issues. It's easy to get depressed and get discouraged, and I was trying to figure out, what is this thing? We're supposed to reach out to each other. You're supposed to open up conversations. So I came up with a formula that I thought would be both helpful for myself and perhaps others as well, which was get on a motorcycle because that's cool, and then go to places. I picked my 48 states. I picked individual cities in each state based on what my 14-year-old self would have come up with, which are funny names.
Yeah.
I started in Two Egg, Florida, and went to Burnt Corn, Alabama, and Possum Neck, Mississippi. But then I started to go to places like Virgin, Utah, and Weed, California, and Rough and Tumble, New Mexico, and Truth or Consequence, California, and Hell, Michigan, and all of these things, just because I thought they were funny. And if you look at my trip, there was a lot of places I couldn't even tell my mother where I was because they were, quite frankly, a little too 14-year-old boyish. So again, it's we're all in this together. We're all trying to do some hard things, and oftentimes we need to feel like there's a community that supports us and that there's help when you need it. And I think that's really what our show is doing, is just find that good. Sometimes that good, the brightest lights are in the darkest corners, and that's really the theme of all of the storytelling that we do.
So true. Earl, I didn't think this topic would come up, but I spent 2 years in my 20s hitchhiking through Europe, Africa, and America. I was by myself.
Perfect.
And the thing is, when you're by yourself, you haven't got another person on another motorbike riding with you. You're just by yourself.
Right. Yep.
People come to you. You are exposed, and you allow people to come to you, and you get to know the people in these areas very, very quickly. And it's a real eye opener. It's part of my foundation when I think about it. I took a Greyhound bus from New York to LA at one point. It took 3.5 days, and I went right through.
I'm sure.
Right through America. I met the entire cross section of America, and I didn't meet the entire 2 years. I didn't meet a single person who wanted to kill anybody else.
Right. Yeah. No, it's the same way. It's and when you're in rural U.S., because all of these towns are tiny towns. I wasn't on the interstate, so I was very much going through small cities. And small city America, you see, is very conservative. But when you need help, when I had a flat tire, my front tire went out, I was able to find, in a really rural area, a really remote area where I had not really seen anyone for an hour, I stumbled upon one person that introduced me to some other people that helped me sort it out. And next thing you know, they were probably the most poignant, helpful, loving people. and they don't know what my political aspirations
Right.
or my feelings are about that. We just saw each other as humans, and they saw that I needed help and they could help, and they did it. And I think that's the theme of what you guys are doing.
Was that in I have because I spoke with you, Earl, before your motorcycle journey, and so
Right.
I had it on my calendar. Did you finish up in Atlanta in
I did,
May?
yeah. So I ended up, I had reached out to the CEO of Triumph, who out of the UK, and I said, "Hey, I'm doing this crazy tour," and I'm calling it the Crazy Tour because it's a tongue-in-cheek mental health kind of fundraising for the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, which is part of the Movember Foundation, which is an Aussie, started thing. And he said, "I love it. Why don't I get you in touch with my chief marketing officer in Atlanta?" And then their PR person said, "Hey, I love it. Why don't you ride with us? We have the largest ride in the US, is in Atlanta, and it'll have, media coverage and celebrities, and it'll be, big time." So I did. I ended up, made it. I thought it was going to take me 45 days. I did it in about 41 days, and I got to ride with everyone. And after doing that and then meeting hundreds of other riders who have their own journeys, I realized that there was a community inside of the motorcycle world that gets it, that saw each other. If you ever see two motorcycles passing on the road, you'll notice that they'll put two fingers down. They'll kind of signal to each other. There's a community, there's an understanding. And I think that's humanity. When you look at each other and you say, "Hey, I'm a person, you're a person." When you see that, I think that's the kind of thing that you get when you get in communities where people know that we all need help and they're all looking out for how they might be able to contribute. So again, it was a great experience, and I got to raise some money for the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. And I think I'd love to do it again. Although I would like to do a Cape Town to Cairo kind of cross Trans Africa trip someday on my motorcycle. But at 58 years old, I'm not sure how many more years I have to do it.
All right,
I'm 64. You've got plenty of years left.
There you go.
Cheers.
Well, it has been an extraordinary journey with you, my friend Earl, just on this call right here. We really appreciate your time. People can find The Good Road on YouTube, or if you're in the US, you can just watch PBS and you'll see it.
That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Earl. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity. It's great to meet you. And again, don't forget me in your journey. Keep posted.
Yeah, I'll keep you up.
Great to meet you. We should have a beer sometime and discuss all these travels.
I've got plenty of time for beer.
To find out more about the book, visit tjswar.com. And to buy it, click on the Amazon link below. To accompany us on our journey, please subscribe to this podcast because we're going to make a $50 million movie.